And I was up there and I was washing my hands and I looked out the window and there were like 6 trucks and like a big Commodore with like the lights coming down and like a 35-foot rocket, you know, like in the middle of the cul-de-sac. And I was like, holy crap, like I'm doing that, and doing the thing, you know, like, and it was really kind of like, took me back, you know, for a minute. And I was like, this is like, I felt like sort of like my childhood self would be like proud of myself.
How's it going, everyone? This is Alex C. Cohen, and welcome to My First Film, the podcast where we talk to some of Hollywood's hottest directors and ask them how they made their first film. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Mr. Colin West. He is a director who has made a ton of incredible projects. A lot of his early shorts were featured on Dust or got Vimeo Staff Picks and have now garnered hundreds of thousands of views. And since then, he's made 2 feature films, Double Walker and Linoleum. Today, we're going to be talking about Double Walker, his debut feature film. It was done on a shoestring budget, but it's a really incredible psychological thriller. It has some horror elements, and if that's your jam, I think it is an awesome genre piece with some really great elements. His second film, Linoleum, stars Jim Gaffigan as a really serious, Bill Nye-esque scientist, and it is such an incredible project. I really love both of his movies. He's an incredibly thoughtful filmmaker, but he's also a teacher, and I think what you'll see in this interview is a lot of his sensibilities really shine through, and he gives some really fantastic advice of how to get after it and go make your first movie. Make sure to stick around to the end. I'm going to give you guys some updates about my first film, Petunia. Without further ado, here's Mr. Colin West. So Columbus, Ohio, cul-de-sac. Tell us about your upbringing and when you first picked up a camera.
Yeah, like you said, I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. I got into film. I like to say I sort of got into film because I was really bad at soccer. And I wasn't actually that bad, I don't feel like, but I didn't make the soccer team in high school when all my friends did. So like all my friends, you know, were off doing their thing for that first year of school, and I didn't really have anything to do. And that was like my hobby. And, you know, I was like 13 at the time. And my mom was like, oh, you should go to the library and get some books and like read some books, you know, in a very like motherly way. And I was like, okay, I'll go to the library. And there was one just down the road from my house, and I went there, but instead of getting books, I got a whole bunch of movies. And I just sort of immediately fell in love with that form of storytelling. In a way, like I'd gone to the movies before and I'd seen stuff, but you know, this like random set of films that I had gotten really kind of like changed me in some way. And so then like every couple of days I would go back to the library and get more and more movies, and you know. And for, you know, all of high school, I was just like getting movies. And the one that really changed it for me was in that first set of films was Darren Aronofsky's first movie, Pi. Have you seen Pi?
I love Pi.
I love Pi. It's now just ingrained in my like DNA, I think.
Yeah.
But that film was so different than anything I'd ever seen. You know, like at that point at like age 13, 14, like all I'd seen was like, you know, the holiday movies at the movie theater. And then I see this like gritty 16 millimeter, like kind of like gross thriller that's like really mathy and heady. And like, I just really love that stuff too. I was really into science and math. And so I was like, wow, this movie is great. And I got online, and this is like, you know, the year 2000, 2001 maybe. And it was like the early days of the internet. And Darren Aronofsky had a webpage. And his email address was just on there. You know, this is before he'd made Requiem for a Dream or Black Swan or all the, you know, whatever. And so I just emailed him and was like, hey, I really like your movie, man. Like, I want to make movies. Like, how do you make movies? And we just kind of exchanged emails for like 6 months. And I'm sure he doesn't even remember, like, but like it really influenced me. And I wrote my first like, you know, feature screenplay when I was like 16. It was totally like a ripoff of Pi. And but it kind of spiraled from there, and that was just like the beginning of my love for it. And it was like, oh, this person actually does this thing, and like it made it palpable.
Were you touching a camera, or was it kind of like you're watching movies in a bubble?
Oh no, I shot about 30 minutes of that film.
That's amazing.
And I gotta dig that up. I haven't in, you know, forever, 20 years. But I was definitely like, my dad had like a high 8 camera, like high 8 tapes. And so I was shooting on his, you know, thing, like any opportunity that I could get, like any school project that was like a paper, I would always ask the teacher, like, hey, can I do like a movie instead? And
always get an A.
Yeah, always get an A. But especially at that time, because like, this is like early digital film. Like this is like when like iMovie 1 had just come out, Final Cut 1. And like, of course, like the transition of friends went basically from like my soccer friends to like the AV nerds at school. And I kind of became like one of those guys.
Is there anything you've really like carried with you through your career?
I think like the big thing with those early films was like just fun. They were just having fun. Like we my like high school group of friends, like we ended up getting like a slot on the public access TV show station. Like every Sunday morning we had to fill like 30 minutes. And so we just did like the most random stupid stuff, and like just to try to fill this time slot. But it gave us like a deadline. It gave us things to do. We had an amazing teacher, like our media arts teacher. His name was Joe Conley. He was like incredible and was like very supportive of all this and like gave us cameras from the school, and things like that. So yeah, it was just fun. I think that's what really like it made me fall in love with it, like because it was joyful.
I'm curious your perspective now that you've done 2 features. I find that now I get so caught up in like the prep and like this has to be perfect and like trying to be a director and trying to impress everyone that I'm having less fun than I did when there was like no stakes and you're just doing this for 30-minute public access. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question that I almost don't want to think about because it is true. There are things about filmmaking that become work as things get bigger and like it expands out. But part of it is like it's a trade-off, right? Because my early films and like the early short films I'm sure of yours are like they're just so unintentional.
Yeah.
Like and there's something nice about that, but also something really short-sighted, I think. And I think with the consideration of like film and film language and like when you start to actually put some time and effort into these things, like you expect more from them.
Yes.
And like with expectations come like kind of a burden maybe. And maybe that's like what you're feeling. I certainly feel that from time to time and more so as like the films get bigger, there is like an element of it that is work, but still the play side of that outweighs it. And so it is like it's a balancing act, I think, Alec. You want it to be the thing that's in your life that's like not only like fulfilling you creatively, but also like putting the money in your pocketbook, right? Yeah. So that's like when, I don't know, like it like you want it to be as pure as possible, but it can, there are some logistics you really have to think about.
Tell me about what you were thinking about for your undergrad education, if you were pushed any certain way and what you ended up doing.
Yeah, sure. So actually my undergrad is in fine arts, like painting and sculpture and performance art and stuff like that. And I went to Ohio State for my undergrad, graduated the BFA, and it was adjacent to film, like it was giving, but first of all, there was no film program at Ohio State at all. And I got interested in fine arts towards the end of high school, like painting specifically. And so when I transitioned into college, I guess I knew I wanted to do something in the creative field. And like, I definitely enjoyed film and filmmaking, but I found this like other passion for more of like the visual arts. And I think I still approach filmmaking like from a fine arts like perspective.
Yeah.
But I ended up working just out of school for an incredible artist named Anne Hamilton.
Yeah.
And traveled around with her to different museums, helped set up her shows, and she's like, really like an international exhibiting artist. And that was kind of the real school for me. Like the undergrad was interesting. It taught me some tools, but working for her and with her, like changed my life drastically. It was like where I learned to think like an artist, and recognizing that like every single waking minute you are on the clock as an artist, and in a good way, like in a way that's like exciting, like where you don't have to separate it and anything can be an inspiration. I think that's kind of what I really took from that experience. So I worked for her for a few years, and then I moved out to LA to do more of like the narrative filmmaking stuff.
What brings you to LA, and like day one in LA, what are you doing?
I didn't have a job. I didn't have, just sort of like up and packed bags and moved out here to LA. Just tried to get my feet wet in whatever I could pick up when I got here,
Was it daunting? Like, did you know a lot of people from your hometown who were out here? Or was it like you were guy number one?
No, I was not guy number one. In fact, those guys, those AV nerd guys that I hung out with in high school that we all had that show together, they all lived out here now. So moving out here, I had this like base of at least a few people that I was very, very close to that I could go to and, ask like, hey, like, how do I get a job? Like, hey, are you working on anything? Can you pull me in? So they would help me out, pull me in, read my scripts, like, help me out on like short films that I was trying to make, even though they were like kind of above it. They had a bit of a head start. Obviously, they'd moved out here earlier and they went to film school and their undergrads and all that.
Talk me through those 4 years leading up to USC.
I was doing everything I could to like learn more about legitimate, bigger budget filmmaking, right? Not just like me and my scrappy like 2 or 3 friends making stuff. I wanted to see like how bigger stuff was made. I essentially just got on like every, Craigslist, Mandy, Film and TV Pro, like all those things, and just submitted myself as a production assistant to like anything I could find.
Yeah.
I started, the best of that came out of PAing for the schools, like big schools like USC, AFI, UCLA, and I ended up doing a lot of work for AFI films, which was really cool. Like they do some really legit stuff over there, and that was kind of like training ground. Like I felt like I was in school just because like I was, they just kept calling me and I kept going and PAing on all of these sets, you know, and that was like really helpful.
Yeah, 100%. Were you doing anything to stay afloat? Because I know for some of the school stuff it's paid, some of it's unpaid. So like financially, where were you at?
Yeah, sure. So moving to LA, yes, I was getting like scraps of money from like all these different little kind of like gigs that I was doing.
Yeah.
But the main sort of moneymaker in my life was I got a job shooting wedding videos. So wedding videos pay a lot, and it's really fun work, and it's kind of easy work. But I did that for many years. I did that all the way through grad school. So like, more or less every Saturday I was like at a wedding shooting as a second shooter for a guy who was doing all the editing and stuff.
What was that moment like deciding, okay, time for grad school?
I was 26, I think, when I had applied to the grad schools. And I actually really wanted to go to AFI. And I got an interview there, but they didn't let me in. They didn't want me, so I didn't go there.
Walk me through it. What were you looking to get out of it, and kind of break it down really quick, those 3 years?
So why I went to grad school was I wanted to skip a bunch of steps, right? So I wanted to go from working below the line jobs all over the place to directing.
Yeah.
And I recognized working those under the below the line jobs that there was no ladder to climb that actually gets you to directing. It is literally you just do it. And I knew that going to grad school would help me produce films of a different quality level that could find a way to actually kind of like boost my career into that next step. So that was the goal. That's I think it was good for doing that. I met a lot of really amazing people, like really good friends of mine to this day for sure are my grad school friends, so that was really beneficial for sure.
I'm a huge fan of your capstone project, your thesis film. Tell me about how that came together. What was the seed of the idea?
I had made that as a sort of proof of concept for the feature film called Linoleum. Yeah. I had written Linoleum already. I was very excited about it. I wrote it in 2015, the first draft, and I used the short film as a way of sort of learning about what I might be up against making the feature.
Yeah.
And so I kind of dedicate it's interesting because the short is the feature, but it's also kind of really not. Like it's a similar tone maybe, but there's really only 2 characters in the short, and it's very small. It's not just like a scene from the feature. It's a whole standalone thing. And I was really proud of it.
Yeah.
Like I think it tried some things. It was good at certain things and not as much at other things. But I was happy about the way that it ended up kind of all coming together. And then that did sort of lead to like an exploration of the project itself, and it led to a lot of changes in the feature. And then eventually years later, the feature got off the ground.
Your shorts have an incredible audience, actually. Tell us about those and being intentional about distribution while you're making shorts and thinking about, okay, will this translate to a feature?
Not every short I make is intentionally to make a feature, right? And I think that those, as far as short filmmaking goes, like, I was lucky enough to get like a Vimeo Staff Pick, which led to a lot of views, I think, of the robot films, which was great. And then Dust, which is like, a Sci-Fi short film distributor, kind of picked up on that, and they've distributed, I think, like 4 or 5 of my shorts. And that, I mean, they're the ones with the audience. I'm glad, yes, people do seem to kind of like visit the shorts, and like it's really nice, actually, because like sometimes you put those things out and you're like, is anybody watching these? Like,
was there anything about Sci-Fi that you felt drawn to?
Sci-Fi was ingrained in me from my father. He was a big sci-fi fan growing up. He's a mathematician. He was a computer scientist. My mom is also in like big tech, so like science and math were like always like a huge part of my upbringing. Like it was like if I weren't in film and the creative arts, like I would totally be in some science, one of the sciences, like probably astronomy. But like I definitely like think that way. I think, but I love the kind of existential nature of science, like, and that's what I'm really drawn to. I think that's why sci-fi really works for me. So it was never conscious, but I just go down that route. Like I think there just like horror, there is a crowd of people who kind of follow sci-fi. It's like it's its own little like world, and I think it's been great to be kind of like a part of that, but it's unintentional.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just how I make stuff.
Double Walker. What was the seed that started this long road to making your first feature?
It was actually a pretty short road. As weird as that sounds, I have to give like full on credit to Sylvie Mix, who was the star of the movie. She co-wrote it with me, and she produced the film. Sylvie and I met, forever ago. I mean, she was about 10 years younger than me. Her mother's about 10 years older than me, and her mom sort of ran in some of the same social circles that I did in Ohio, and we got to know each other. And then Sylvie was just kind of around. All of Columbus knows Sylvie Mix. Like, she's like kind of one of those like really kind of like magnetic people. And brings people together, and also is like a very like a big creative force in the city. And so I had always kind of thought like it'd be really cool to work with her on something. The collaborator thing was really important at that point, because I was also stuck in like, oh, what's it going to be? And Linoleum there was conversation about it being funded and being made as well. So I was like that was on the horizon, but it wasn't close enough. And I was just like getting really impatient too. And I was like, I want to make something. And Sylvie was like passionate too, and we just kept each other on track. Which was really cool. And like, and so we basically like, I was in LA, she was in Ohio. So once a week we would just FaceTime for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I would write notes. And then over the course of the next week, I would write down stuff like maybe 5-10 pages worth of stuff, send it to her. We'd talk about it the next day. We'd expand upon it, all that stuff. And it was just really, really organic, Alec, really organic, to the point where I've never made anything before or since that's been so organic. But it just kind of came out, and we were like gung ho about it. We talked about our influences, like all that stuff. And it just kind of came about.
You're still living in LA. Are you still doing wedding videos, or what is this like right after school? Are you diving headfirst into this, or is there something else going on in your life?
I was also working on a bunch of scripts all the time. One big cool thing that I did that I was really happy about was me and a couple of friends, we all, from my film school program, we all got an office together. So we could kind of keep the conversation going. Like, and all of us were writer-directors, and we all just kind of like went to this office, every day. But, it'd be like random people would show up and stuff. And we just like kept working. And like we were learning from each other, like how to survive on the other side of film school, right? So yes, I was still shooting wedding videos and editing them even in the office and so forth. But at the same time, like one of our friends like got a film into a major film festival. So we were like, what was that experience like? And then like another friend like had to pitch to a studio, and we're like, what was that about? We just got to like help each other see what like demystify everything, just continuously demystify. I mean, and the script too, it wasn't a traditional script.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of like written like a novella. Like it's like 60 pages. There's like bits of dialogue, but there's also like camera direction. It's like the camera pulls in as like, like, so it was just very untraditional. And it just worked for that story. Like it isn't quite like anything that I've shot before. Like it doesn't quite look like anything or feel like anything. And I think a lot of that is probably because it is like this very much of a collaboration with Sylvie and I. I think the other projects that I've made in the past are a little bit more purely like me.
How was the pre-pro overall?
Yeah, sure. So the pre-pro, like I knew we were going to shoot it in Ohio. So like at the end of November, like around Thanksgiving, I went to Ohio, and my friend who lived there had actually just moved to LA. And so his house in Columbus was just empty. And so I moved into his house, and we ended up making that like the home base of the movie. We shot like half the movie in this house, using like every room, like the basement, the backyard, the front yard, like everything. And also the people that came to shoot that helped me crew, we all lived in the house. So it was like a really cool, like little community. But like, as far as pre-production goes, like we didn't have any money besides like the money that I was putting into the project, really, which wasn't a ton. And it was like essentially like, a lot of favors, but also just asking myself like, okay, what are the locations that I have? And so I knew I had like my parents' house in Columbus, my brother's house, my brother's car, like that house, my friend's house that we were all staying in, like the park is free. So I just kind of like made a list, and as we were like talking about the story, which again was sort of being written up until we shot the thing. It was like, okay, like, what do we have? What can we exploit? Like, what favors can we sort of call in? And we wound up with like a crew. The crew kind of ebbed and flowed between like 5 people and like 10 people, depending on like the day and like how much sort of went into it. But everybody on the crew had like, back end points and stuff like that. So everybody's like invested, and I had worked with pretty much all of them before anyway. So we already had sort of a shorthand and things like that.
How long was principal photography on Double Walker?
I think we shot for 17 days total. I think two of those days were pickup days. So this was in January of 2020. We did the pickup days in February of 2020, and then obviously COVID. So yeah, we were lucky to get like right in before.
How did you feel that first day?
That first day showing up on set, like I was just like happy. Of course I'm like nervous, but I knew that the nerves were more like you just gotta like roll the camera. So like I tried to roll the camera as quick as possible, knowing that like maybe I'm not going to use that shot particularly, just to like get the juices going and be like, okay, get that out of the way. And we didn't end up using those shots actually. So it was it was just try to get it going quickly, especially on day one.
So you own the camera. You guys shot Double Walker on.
So we shot on an Ursa Mini Pro 4.6K.
Yeah.
And we had a set of like Rokinon kind of lenses, primes.
Yeah.
But we also rented one great Canon lens. I think it was something like a 40 or maybe a 50 mil. And we used that as much as we could.
And then were you operating, or did you have a camera operator?
I operated probably like 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And then, Zach McClain did the other.
You guys shoot, the pandemic hits. Are you taking these hard drives back to LA? Where is your editor? What's happening in post?
So our editor, her name is Kira Burton. She's amazing. She was, she lived in that house with us as we were shooting it. So she was doing stuff she was making dailies like as we were shooting and working on it. Kira was working with us on set, but she was also then, once we got back to LA, Kira and I had one in-person editing session before lockdown, and then we edited the whole thing over Zoom. And so we edited all of that spring, and finally like exported the final cut basically in June. No, we locked in June. We did all the sound work, and then we kind of married it all. And I think that was like August 1st, maybe, when we like kind of finished.
Yeah.
So like it was like October to August. So maybe like 10 months of like making the movie. And then literally the next day after we had done that final export, I went off to do pre-production in New York for Linoleum, the next movie. So it was like very like just flowing right from one into the next, which was.
Did you find the final edit was pretty close to the script, or were you guys really discovering the story while you were editing?
There's a lot of discovery in post. We knew that already going in, like, but because we knew that the movie was going to be very like atmospheric, cerebral, sort of interpretive, there was a lot of rearranging. Kira and I made charts, we made graphs, we made like and it jumps around in time a ton too. So like there was all of this kind of, it was two things. And this is what it always comes down to for my films for some reason, but it's like tracking like the logic thread and the emotional thread, and they're like never the same.
Were you thinking about distribution early on? Did you have any money for film festivals, and how did this get in Cranked Up's hands?
Yeah, and it had its own festival run, which was great, but you know, kind of minor. And then I had known about the folks at Cranked Up from one of my old high school friends, Chad Simpson, who actually ended up producing Linoleum, but he linked me up with the people over at Cranked Up, which is really Good Deed Entertainment. And they actually are based in Ohio. And so the cool thing is like, I got to meet a lot of them, like, you know, like throughout the process. And I had met them years prior, just through like my friend Chad linking us up and being like, you guys should talk. And they actually, Good Deed was actually very early on, like kind of like interested in Linoleum, like, I mean, in like 2016 or 2017, maybe, or something like that. But then like through those connections, I ended up, Survival Skills, that movie that I produced, ended up getting distributed by Good Deed, Cranked Up. Yeah. And so I had already had a relationship with them, and then I sent them this film and they really liked it. They liked the Ohio ties. They really liked Sylvie. Sylvie was doing another movie at the same time too. And so it was just sort of serendipitous, and they were great. Like they were really helpful and like genuinely grounded. And Andy Myers over there kind of led the crew over there. And they did a small theatrical release. So maybe like, I think it was like 6 or 10 theaters across the country, and, you know, for a few weeks with Double Walker. And then it was like released on digital, and like, I was really happy with it. I learned a lot. So like, if I were to do it again, I mean, in some ways I'd probably just do it the same because it was a lot of fun, but it was certainly it was the hardest thing that I'd ever done in my life to that point. For sure.
Yeah.
Like,
but you mentioned that it was fun.
A ton of fun. Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Great memories.
Yeah.
You know, like I have known like bad, like sour memories.
100%.
Like, just.
Do you think that Double Walker helped get Linoleum off the ground, or did it play any piece in the Linoleum feature being made, or was it kind of two separate things?
Linoleum would not be as good without Double Walker, and it's not because I think Linoleum would have happened without Double Walker, but it wouldn't have been as good because I was so nervous about like first feature blah 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 crap that it took so much of the nerves away to like have done a thing, and it's like, okay, I got that behind me, like, and now I just get to go right into this next movie, like direct another movie like within 10 months. Like that was like amazing. Like I just felt like I was already running, and then they said go, and it was like great, you know. So like I push it all the time for people to go back to their hometowns and shoot their first movies on a low budget just to make it, and to learn about things. Like it's very, very, very likely not going to be like this big explosive, you know, movie, as far as like you know, like it's not going to change the world, but it will change your career. Like when people, if you make a movie, like people look at you like you've like landed on the moon or something. Like they just don't get it. They don't know how. And I did that too with people who had made movies before I made a feature as well. It's like this mystical thing, but really it's just like showing up and like working hard.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of like what it really.
Yeah, I love that. That really is like the heart and soul of this podcast. Is that's the analysis paralysis I'm in right now. Is I know I'm capable of making a movie. I've made short films that are like 30 minutes long, where it's like if I just do 2 of these, it's basically
not that. Like I want to like break that down too, Alec, because it is no harder making a feature than it is making a short. I'm not joking. I know it sounds crazy.
No,
all you do is add production days. You're not adding like I promise you, like it's like even with post-production, like post-production is going to feel the same in a short as it does in a feature, and even like timeline wise, like it's pretty close to the same. So like but the only thing is like on set, like you're just going to be shooting for a few more days, weeks, whatever. But like outside of that, like you're doing the same amount of prep, like you're putting the same amount of work into it. It's just, production is longer.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I like to look at it. Like it's
100%.
not, it's not crazy.
That's a really valuable insight.
So do it.
And
Make
I
it,
know.
Alex. Make
I'm
it.
making. So you guys stick around for a little bit, and we'll talk my Petunia updates after this. But Colin, the other thing I have to ask. So I know we're in 2024, and you have a lot of exciting things on the horizon. But just in the day to day, what are you doing, and how are you staying afloat financially?
Sure. So like I said, I mean, through a lot of that, I was doing wedding videos. When COVID hit, it certainly slowed down and it transitioned, and I've been teaching now lately. So, and I think that's how you and I met, through one of my former students. But yeah, I've been teaching at a couple of universities, and I find that to be really wonderful work that like I've always wanted to do. It's not because like I'm like stuck. I would be doing this even if I was making $1 million every year doing movies. Like I do it because I'm passionate about it, and I like it a lot. So yeah, so I've been teaching, and that's been my kind of like main source of income.
For the kids living in the cul-de-sacs, what is the single most important piece of advice that got you to where you are today?
I guess like even going back to like the Darren Aronofsky thing. Like I remember when he and I were like exchanging those emails back forever ago, he was basically just like urging me to just like go do it. And that was really encouraging, like where it wasn't, it was less about like, oh, you need this, you need to do this first. It was just like, no, like go have fun, make some stuff.
Did you have fun making Linoleum?
Oh, so much fun. So much fun. I had so much fun making Linoleum. I had so much fun making Double Walker. And it's, you just feel like a kid. I remember like, especially with Linoleum, I remember we were shooting in a cul-de-sac, which was of course sort of based on my childhood cul-de-sac. And the bathroom for the shoot was in one of the houses, kind of up on a hill. And it was on the second floor of that house. And I was up there and I was washing my hands, and I looked out the window, and there were like 6 trucks and like a big Commodore with like the lights coming down, and like a, like there's like this giant 20-foot, 35-foot rocket, like in the middle of the cul-de-sac. And I was like, holy crap, like I'm doing that, and doing the thing, and it was really kind of like, took me back, for a minute. And I was like, this is like, I felt like sort of like my childhood self would be like proud of myself.
You can see Double Walker on Tubi.
I think so.
On Tubi. Go check it out. I unfortunately had to see ads, but if you want to see without ads, it's also on Prime, and it's only a couple bucks, and some of that money goes back to Colin and Sylvie, so I recommend you try to do that. See it the way it was intended to be made. And then I saw Linoleum on Hulu, so I believe if you have Hulu, you can see it. Is there anywhere else?
It's on all the other places if you want to buy it.
Yeah.
Too, but Hulu's the kind of free one.
Yeah. Feel free to support the filmmakers if you can afford to do it. And Linoleum is fantastic. Both the movies are fantastic. I loved seeing Jim Gaffigan in Linoleum in a more serious role. But now hopefully people know a little bit more about Colin West.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks so much, Colin. We'll see you on my third movie.
All right. It's a pleasure.
All right, that was a fantastic interview with Colin. I'm so grateful for his time. There was so much wisdom packed into there, and I like that we kept circling back to, was it fun? I think that is so important. I've seen directors who are not having fun on their projects, and you sense that from the top down. Other people are not having fun because they're not having fun. So make sure next time you're working on your project to have some fun. I know I had 2 big to-dos for this week, and I was not able to get them done. So the things that I said during Jonah's podcast I would do is a deck and my list of 20 people that I want to reach out to for funding for Petunia. I did not do either of those things. I'm going to be completely honest. I did send the script out to some people. Talking to Jonah last week got me super inspired to start to get collaborators on board on this and really get the ball rolling. So I'm really excited. I think the people that I send it out to, once I hear some feedback and get some notes, we'll be ready to do a 4th pass on the screenplay. One thing that I have worked on the past week is actually another screenplay. And you're probably like, you're crazy. You want to make this feature. Why not be making the feature? I can't help myself from writing, and I think sometimes I get burnt out. And when I do a lot of revisions really quickly, it's like, oh, I'm so close. I'm like, my eyes are to the page of the Petunia screenplay. And it's kind of nice and freeing to just take a step back and just write something for fun or just write something on spec that you have no clue where it's going to go. So I just stepped back and I outlined this other screenplay and I just started writing it. So I have no clue if that's going to be a thing or if it just is what it is. But it has been really fun and productive. Thank you guys so much again for tuning into the My First Film podcast. This podcast is distributed by Pro Video Coalition. Make sure to check out provideocoalition.com to see my full article with Colin. Gratitude to Oscar Alva for providing camera and audio equipment for our first in-person podcast. Gratitude to my fiance, Mackenzie Malley, for producing this podcast. And thank you to Avery Pascal and Kenny McMillan for making this podcast a reality. Make sure to check out our socials at My First Film Pod, our website, myfirstfilmpod.com. And thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.